Hi, and welcome back to the Mortgage Broker Broadcast. This week's podcast is our anniversary edition. Yes, the Mortgage Broker Broadcast has been out there now in the marketplace for a year, and we wanted to celebrate that. And I'm saying we because I've got Ash onto the podcast. We're going to have a talk about the podcast, why we did it, the feedback we've had. We're splitting it into two parts. So this week's podcast is Ash and I just having a chat about the podcast, what we've learned over the past 12 months. And then the second part is paying homage to the guests we've had on. And I've been so lucky with the podcast. I've had some amazing guests who have really been honest, truthful, wore the heart on the sleeve out into the media and really sort of shared some really great hints, tips. Honesty has just been in abundance. So we're going to play, like I say, homage to that and just get some clips out next week from some amazing guests. But this week is just Ash and I reflecting over the past year, past 12 months. So let's get Ash onto the podcast. Ash, a year in to the Mortgage Broker Broadcast. Can you believe that?
I know, it's mad, isn't it?
Absolutely mad.
I can't believe we're here. Also, I just realized that we've been bragging about my microphone and it's not even been on the whole time.
I wonder why we're just getting a bit of feedback then at the start, and I guess I know why now. That does sound actually. I get what you mean because like now it sounded okay before, but now it sounds awesome.
Well, good. And like the whole time, I was like, wait a minute, no, mate, I cannot believe that we're here. It's a year. It's literally been a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we put the trailer out 31st of March, 2021, and the first episode went live on the 7th of April. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's scary. Like, I think that's crazy because of how much has changed in a year and how much has evolved and grown. And the fact that because you've been recording podcasts before, but not like this. This was a different way of doing it.
Absolutely not. I've certainly got more grey hair than I had before. I'm just looking in the light there thinking, wow. So yeah.
Spent a lot more money on
But look at the set. Like I was looking back and look at the original videos we did, and we were obviously recording. I was recording the videos at the start and just putting the audio out there. And I'm looking back thinking, wow, I've got lockdown haircuts. I've got a massive beard, and so I can remember the first time I had my haircut post lockdown, and you went, I didn't realize that were you. You look totally different.
It was, man, it was. And I remember because this came about and how much has changed since this though. Like when this came about, like I can't believe we're a year in. That does feel like crazy. And now it's amazing because I use this now to farm guests for my show. I'm like, who's been on Craig's show that looks interesting? I'm going to reach out to them.
That's the idea, is to get the guests on there interested. And because the thing is, the beauty of it is when I listen to the guests when they've been on your podcast or other people's podcasts that are out there that are not as good as mine and yours, but I'm joking, obviously. But when the guests on though, you just get different angles of people, don't you? So like these different things you'll talk about, different things come out in conversation. And I think that's the beauty of the podcast. So even though you get the same person, you can get the same person on sometimes on a different podcast, you just get a different aspect to them because the host goes about things in very different ways. And one thing that I've learned, Ash, is, and I was talking about this earlier on today, is how difficult is it being a host on a podcast?
Way. Well, I tell you what I struggle with is, and I don't know if you're the same, I struggle with this idea of it's like spinning plates. There's so many things that are happening because you're trying to remember, you got to try and first of all remember what to ask them. Then you're trying to the word active listen to try and listen to what they're saying, but also keep yourself, I don't know if you feel this, but keep yourself on track to make sure that you're going to ask them the next question. And throughout that, I always find that they'll say something that's really cool.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing. They'll say something really cool. I'm like, I really want to ask them about that. I'll remember that. But they're in the middle of the flows, and then I never remember. I'd love to do an episode on all the questions that never got asked.
I'm going to let you into a secret. You know what? Because I don't want to look as though I'm writing stuff down so if I'm talking to somebody, I've asked them a question and they say something, because my memory, like I'm getting on a bit. My memory's not 100% what it was when I was the same age as you. So, but you know what I do? I'm letting you into a secret here, which I've never ever shared with anybody else. This is honestly the first. I make signs on my fingers. So, like, if it's something that I want to, so for example, if it's something beginning with C, it's like easy enough to do. So, like, I'm like, so then I'll make sort of things with my fingers to think, remember that, and then I'll look like it'll end, and I'll go, oh yeah, A. Oh yeah, this like. So then
Wow.
yeah. So like, honestly, it's just something because I didn't like writing stuff down when I was interviewing somebody because I think it can
It
sometimes put
looks
people off.
rude. It
Yeah,
looks
exactly.
rude. I mean, I used to do stuff like that, and if I'm doing it, like if I do write it down, people are watching now, and if I'm like on my iPad and I'm writing, you can tell, and I think you absolutely lose like all like what's the word, like connection. I really think you
Yeah,
do.
yeah, definitely.
I
Yeah.
can't believe you do that. That's so cool. I couldn't do that. I'd be thinking, why is my hand in a weird claw shape? Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know if you do this. When I watched mine back, I've always done this with some like amazing guests in our industry, but also like amazing guests around the world who like, and I'm like, oh wow, they're saying something really useful. And I did not know that because I'm too busy like going, what's the next thing? What's the next thing to ask? It's insane. It's a lot harder than people think.
It is. I don't think I'm trying to put people off doing podcasts because I think I'm very much of an abundance mentality, and I'm absolutely loving seeing the podcasts that are coming out now and people actually experimenting, doing things. And like, I know you look back, you look back at the first videos you were doing, and I know you've gone through your mind thinking, do I delete them? Do I get rid of them? What do I do? Do I restart again? Do I
Yeah.
reinvent myself or anything like that? And because when you're hosting a podcast or doing any sort of videos, you can be, I just find that I can be overcritical of myself. Whereas that's a year in now. Like I can remember sweating, thinking I've got to edit this podcast for tomorrow, and it's literally 11 o'clock at night. I'm sat on Movavi or wherever it is, and other editing software is available. But like I was sat on that thinking, why am I sat here? It's taking me hours to do this. Whereas now, 5 minutes tops, literally just clipping.
But it's
Not
so
clipping.
hard when you it's so hard when you first do it. Like I think like that who was I chatting to about this recently? It was someone, and I was saying like how the hard thing is that if you push through that really awkward phase, it will get easier. But you have to. There's no way around that kind of like time sink. You know what I mean? Like the fog. Like I remember, like when you try and syndicate your podcast to get onto Apple, and that takes. You've never done it before. To try and get Apple to get your podcast on, it's the hardest thing. And now, like I produce like your show and Carla's show and all these. It's like yep. But the beginning, hours and hours. It's a long time, but you were really doing a lot as well at the beginning. Like you still do now, but like you were like filming, editing, record. Like obviously now I do all that for you, but a lot of that at the time, like it was insane. Like it was a lot of work, a lot of time spent getting this off the ground for you.
It was, but I think it gave me good grounding to understand exactly what was needed to be done to get it out into the marketplace. You know, I think if you're just giving it somebody, go, right, there's my recording, and then that's it kind of thing. It's not. There's no education there, which you can't share either. We've talked about this. Like I was literally on a call this morning with two of the financial advisors in the firm talking about how to shoot in Movavi and edit in Movavi. And again, I will reiterate that other software is available. But, and I'm not on any affiliate with Movavi, trust me. I pay the yearly subscription as well. But like you showed me something like, all right, wow, that's just so much simpler than what it was. It's just constantly learning, because when you're looking at that digital marketing space, things you look, guys, we joke about gear, and like, I've got Elgato tattooed on my
That's
arm.
all he does. It's just everything in your. You may as well be sponsored by Elgato in your
Wish I
studio
was.
now.
Literally,
Yeah, that would be nice.
I wish I were. Do you know how Chris Target's idea is to be sponsored by
Yorkshire
Yorkshire
tea.
Tea? Yeah, I think mine's Elgato. Absolutely
That would
Elgato.
be you. I could see you being Elgato. You are, for me, when I think about you now, when I first thought about, shut up, Siri. When I first thought about you, I would always think Mr. Apple. You're just Mr. Apple. And then over the last, over the last kind of 3-4 months, you've just become Apple and Elgato.
That's it. But that's your fault. We had this conversation before. That is down to you.
Yeah. Well, Elgato is the best equipment for this type of stuff, really. Like if people are listening to this going, what does he mean? Elgato is they make like podcasting and live streaming equipment. So like lighting, microphones, boom arms, but they're the best ones by far.
Gaming, like just gaming for stuff as well. Because my son comes into my office,
I bet he's
and then
jealous.
he's just literally, what can I have a bit of that? I need to make that. I need to get that done right, and it's sort of then all of a sudden gear disappears over the weekend. But
it is definitely a gaming space. That's the thing; they are like gaming spaces because they're all the same thing. So one thing I would ask you then: how have you found the transition? Like, as in, so what's been the response for the podcast? That's what I'd love to ask you. Like, the year has gone through from starting it completely cold. How's the response? I mean, I know the stuff, but I'd love to know your take on it, like the response of it. What's it been like from a public perception?
I think I've just been sort of, it's just easy to say, and it's a bit of a cliche, but just blown away by how many people listen to it, how many people give me feedback, even like just not random people, but obviously mortgage brokers, people in financial service industry, just reaching out, just messaging saying, I just want to say thank you. Like you've got some amazing guests on the podcast. They've also like watched the videos on YouTube as well, the solo stuff that I've done. But they just sort of said thank you for giving back to the mortgage industry. And it's not, that's sort of like, when you look at that, that sometimes can be lost in income, doing this for the money, doing this for the likes, doing this for the follows, doing this for the, like all the things that you shouldn't be doing it for, is actually, that just makes me feel better about doing this because it's helped people getting into the industry and also help them sort of to move within the industry and create a career out of that. And it's not all, that's not down to me about doing it. It's about the guests that have agreed to be on the podcast, shared heart on the sleeve kind of thing. I've been so lucky to have some amazing guests onto the podcast who have just, like, I know it was like at the beginning. I know when we had this conversation at the start and we sort of talked about it, like, okay, you're going to do a weekly podcast. Who's going to come on my podcast? Who am I going to interview? Like, where does that? And it's the same for the bro. And like you relate to it in various guises because brokers are the same of doing videos or what am I going to talk about being a mortgage broker doing a video or why would I do a podcast about what can I do a podcast about? And it's just about getting out there and just doing it. But there is so many, as soon as I started to reach out to people, it's then, you go through times where, and I know I'm sort of trying not to look at your face right now because
Why?
you go through times where you are booked out, you are literally weeks ahead. You're booked out 4 or 5 weeks ahead. And I try not to get to that point. I try to get to that happy medium of not too near.
That's because I'm booked out. Is that why you're trying not to look at me?
What I try to do is like get that balance of not too far in advance so we can talk about a few topical things and it's not out of date. But then also as well, you don't get close because I know what it was like when I talked about then where like I was sweating at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, knowing the podcast had got to go out at 6 o'clock the next morning, and I'm trying to edit it and perfect it, and I'm like swearing at my machine, my laptop, and just literally. Whereas, I'm slightly less stressed about it now.
I think the thing that's really interesting that I've found with yours, and thanks for the subtle dig at the fact that I am very scheduled out. I am always 12 weeks ahead. People who come on the show know that. I have to remind people. People come on every week. I have a reminder, and I have to, like, Dan Reddish is coming out on when we're recording this, and I go, Dan, you know that show we recorded like 6 months ago? It's actually coming out now.
What did I say? Like, what was you have a different title now in a different business, Dan.
If it was me, if people follow me, I'd be like, what's he? It's completely out of date now. But one thing I would say that I've noticed, like I noticed this show had way more impact than I ever thought it would have, and because
thanks for that, Ash. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I thought I said it in that way because I thought it'd be a bit of a dig, but it did because I was starting to get messages like going, like when I was having discovery calls with clients and things from the industry, they'd be like, "Well, I've listened to the Mortgage Broker broadcast." I was like, "So you're not following any of my content?" No, 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 no. I never know. I just know that you work with Craig and I like the show. And I was like, "Oh, okay, then that's cool." And I started getting more messages from people talking about your show, which made me make a podcast. I mean, it literally made me make a podcast because I was like, maybe I should probably do one because Craig is doing it. Like, it's had such an impact. And the thing I loved about your show, and you hit it, and I think this is like, I'm sure that people listening to this will probably feel the same. You said, there's other great podcasts out there in the mortgage space. There's Alex's show. Mine's all right. Carla's just released one, but and like Chris, you mentioned, and you know them all because they've all been on your show. But the truth is, there really wasn't a show for brokers buy a broker or buy someone from the, like, that's something I definitely thought with yours when we were doing it. Like, and I'm sure people will resonate that the way you interview, especially that I edit your shows, the same guest comes on, but they get asked very different questions from Alex than they do you and they do like me. Like, because I'm that weird hybrid, but I'm more into how it works technically. Alex is into the business side, but yours, when I watch yours, and I can see why brokers would prefer it, is it's like, ground floor, like grassroots understanding, broker talking to broker. I don't know. Do you ever feel that way when you're interviewing people? Because I think that's what this show has that's unique, that none of us can take. None of us could copy it, or because we're not trading. We're not that a broker.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the thing is, the problem I have with the podcast is that when you're getting such good guests on, and like I said, I'm looking to have amazing guests on, you could talk forever. Like we've had to sort of like cut it down, get it within an hour, get it within a certain period, because then there is so much. I think what the thing is that the people that reach out to me, not just like you say, you know what I'm like. It's not about me. It's about, like, the podcast is not mine. I never see the Mortgage Broker broadcast as my podcast. It's a podcast that I do, and I get great guests on and share it out there. And I think the thing that the sort of surprises me with that kind of podcast is that the feedback that I get is very positive, because it's brokers talking, listening to other brokers, lenders, technology, all those sort of different aspects. But there's so many people out there that want to help. I think that from a new broker coming into the industry, the reaction is that they are very surprised on how many people are out there offering free advice. I think that's the thing with it. Whereas in the other industries and industries that they come from, they sort of say it's not like this, it's not like this there. But because you have got to like I'm not a maverick and that, because there's loads of people that want to do this, but it's very much an abundance mentality. It's like, if I can help one single person set up their own mortgage broker firm or become a broker and build a successful career out of it, happy days. Like, if they don't work with me, then fine. But if I can help them in some sort of way, well, that helps you sleep better at night. That's the way that I look at it. And I think that's sort of, it's when you look at the guests that I've had on and they talk about abundance mentality, and it's not, they never come on talking about why they're amazing or what it's about helping and sharing and giving honesty. So I think the one thing that I like, which is now starting to get a little bit more, is that some amazing guests have been on and talked about their journey, talked about what they're experiencing in financial services, how, and all those sorts of things. But there's probably one little thing with each of them that they really focus on. And so, like, now I'm getting back those guests who have been on the podcast back on and just drilling down a little bit more on that thing. So, like, we talked about Matt from Aldermore, who came on the podcast, and he sort of talked right at the end of the podcast. He started talking about the 3 pillars, and it was sort of, well, let's just park that there a second, Matt. We need something more specific. So it's great to get to know Matt. I spent an hour chatting to Matt. He's a talkative guy and a really good guy, and everybody knows Matt from Aldermore from a broker point of view. So they got to know him a lot more. But then it's like getting drilling down his sort of true core values. The same with like Dave Coleman. There's quite a lot. Like Dave's come back on the podcast. We've already recorded it, and it's a few weeks away. Not 12 weeks like yours, but it's a few weeks away. So is that another dig in there? Did I get that in there? But yeah, there's like, and what I'm excited about now is getting some of the guests coming back on and drilling down a little bit more in like their real niche specific thing that they've particularly done. So yeah, it's like, but I think I'm just amazed. I think that's probably one word that I can say is the people that reach out to me, give me feedback, and just enjoy listening to the podcast, whether they're in the gym, running, working, doing any, like whatever they're doing, then yeah, I just think, who wants to sit and listen to me rabble on for a little bit of a period of time? However, that the guests do help the number of listeners and subscribers that we get.
Well, people like it. And I like that. I love that idea of returning guests. I always say, I think I might have said it to you, but I definitely say all the time, is this idea of, if you think about, like, I'm not a big superhero fan, but if you think about superhero movies, which I'm not a big fan, but it's one of the, which would be really shocking. Most people think I would be, but no. But anyway,
you can ride a tricycle though, Ash.
I can ride a tricycle. But I was all right. I actually quite liked. I liked superhero films until Disney started ramming them down our throats. Till you start going, this is just a cash cow. I know what you're doing. You're just trying to make us make more and more money. This is ridiculous. But why I say that is, from an interview point of view, I think if you look at like a superhero film or a book or something like that, they always have this origin story. So the first film is always going to be about who they are, how they got to where they got to, and then they're going to overcome some form of, they're going to have like their first trial or whatever.
Yeah.
And the superhero films are fine, but there's a reason why, if you look at like the way that consumers' behavior is, it's always the second and third one that does better. And that's because you jump straight into the action in the second one or the third one. Like the second one, we know who they are, we know what they do, they know all the backstory. We can dive straight in. I always think about the old school Spider-Man films, and it's like when I was a kid and stuff, and it's like literally the first one is all like, yeah, he's got bitten by a spider, but then the second one, it's like straight in, the first scene, there he is. And that's what I feel about your guest. Now you're bringing them back on. That episode where you're talking about the 3 pillars, it's like the first thing you talk about. You're back, go and check out that other episode if you don't know who this guy is. Now let's talk about the 3 pillars that you hinted to there. And that episode is packed with so much value. And I think that's something that nobody does. I haven't done that yet. And I think, and no one I really know, like we joke about Alex Kerr being like, I'm like on his show like 15 times or whatever. But the reality is, the more you bring people back, the more layers you get. And I think that's something that's exciting for the second year of Mortgage Broker Broadcast, going background and getting all the people you liked before, but bringing them back on. And they now know what the show is. You're a better interviewer, and you can get even more value for the people.
Definitely. I think, like you say, I never thought of that analogy before. And like you said, I'm with you. I'm not a Marvel superhero kind of situation going on, but I get what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying.
It's the basic concept. I mean, it's very easy, whether you like them or not. Sorry, Alex.
But see, he had to get in there somewhere.
It's because do you know why? It's because I got many spies and many eyes. And when I do that, everyone's going to send me a message. Everyone's going to send Alex a message. Just you watch. They'll send him a message. I will get a message from Alex going, "You said this." And I go, "Yeah, because you're all little grasses. You're all little rats. I know what you do. I know what you do." Do it on purpose now so I can see and trace it back.
I think these are, I get what you're saying.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It is funny. I'm just reserving judgment. Can you tell? I'm being quite reserved there with any comments or anything like that from that point of view.
No, not in a good, it's in a funny way. We've been doing this for years. Like, it's this constant, like, So what, we're going to be doing some stuff with best bits, aren't we? So we're going to be clipping one of those up. So that's for them to understand what you're going to be doing next.
Absolutely. So, we're going to look at getting some best bits out there. Like I said, I think you can sometimes lose, like when you listen to a podcast, sometimes depending on what you're doing, you might miss those go, might listen to the whole podcast, but it's hard to concentrate in it for sort of like if you like. I have podcasts on when I'm working, so I'll have like YouTube in the background with a podcast on, and I'll be working and pick up something that they say, something that's relevant, and then I'll listen, but then I end up rewinding back and stuff like that. So people can't always do that. So what I thought about doing was getting some best bits out there. We already do the clips a little bit, but we're going to change up a little bit and get a little bit more meat on the bones of actually. So when you talk about Matt doing the 3 pillars and the other guests that's been on and talk about what they've been doing and like their sort of snippets of amazing information and help and support, then we're going to get those people, get those a little bit more lengthwise but then just those best bits of going out, because I think, Jesus, it's been a year. Like we've had 52 podcasts. You've got 52. I think I did a couple of solos at the beginning, didn't I? And then stopped doing it. So I would say we've got 50 guests. We should be up to 50 guests by now. You've been on a couple of times, so probably might be looking at 48.
No, I've been on once. I have interviewed you another time. That's it.
I know, yeah.
This is the third one.
I know. So we probably had about 45 guests then, and
I'm not a guest.
That's a lot of guests. That is a lot of guests. That's a lot of people onto podcasts, and you think about 45 people in a room all talking about what they do, how they do it, the values, what's important to them, and all those sorts of things. You're going to have you couldn't sit there for hours and then, so you're going to miss bits. You're not going to be able to interview them all. You're not going to listen to them all, focus on them all for that period of time. So I think it's just going back and going, do you know what? That was that golden nugget from there. And just spending a bit more time on sharing those little things and paying the due respect to the guests that we feel that they deserve.
Yeah, I think, like you say, like from my side of it, as the producer side of it, I definitely keep looking at our library of content that we have in our shared file that just keeps building and building and building, and I just keep looking at it going, there's so much, as you say, like golden nuggets in there that are just not going out there in the world. And anyone who knows me knows I'm a big like content guy. I have this thing. That's why I called you, and then I called Craig, and then I was like, I hung up. I was like, no, because I have this like weird feeling where if there's something, I have this thing where if I know that there's value and it's not being used, it really drives me mad, because I feel like there are people out there that could use that, and we have the know-how to do it. We just doesn't fall into our quote unquote strategy. So we are, like you say, we're moving up. We're going to like lean heavily into the podcast, I think, and just take over the world of like clips so that you guys can get it all, because some of the stuff these guests have said is amazing, and the new ones will be just as good, if not better, because we'll be leveling up and doing even more. So I'm excited.
No, I totally am. And I think when you look back, like we talked about earlier, when you look back at how the podcast has evolved over the last 12 months, it's just the same with everything. Like brokers have had to evolve with the marketplace and what's going on. We've evolved with the podcast. You've look at what you've got even more gear than you had when I first met you.
Too much gear. They sort of gas, isn't it? Gear acquisition syndrome.
Is that what it's called?
It's got a bad case of gas.
Gas.
Just awful gas problem.
You love that bit, don't you?
I love it. Well, that's worth all the money that I paid for it. I've got to put that. Anyone who knows me, I have to play that somewhere.
You've got to get that in. No, but I'm joking apart. I am sort of understand what's happened over the last 12 months and trying to get clarity on that and where we started, where we are now, the people that have reached out, the listeners, the subscribers is just immense. And I am sort of blown away. I'm amazed by where we've gone. But like now, as you know, I'm always like this. I'm never one for looking behind, never one for the look. It's good to reflect, absolutely, which is we're doing on the podcast today. And we're going to get another podcast out next week following this with the best bits, what we've talked about, and get a bit more meat from the guests we've had. But I'm so looking forward to the next 12 months and where the podcast goes, where the mortgage industry grows, getting some technology people on as well and looking at where that's going from that point of view. So, and there's some big players in the market that are ramping up the mortgage broker world, shall we say. So I'm looking forward to get those people on here as well.
Very nice, mate. Let's do it. What else have we got to say?
I know, yeah, exactly. What else can you say to
You're gonna sit here. We said we're gonna keep this short. We said we'll do a 15-minute, half an hour in.
We
could talk forever.
I know, yeah. I know.
But no, I'm really excited. Let's bring on the next step. You guys are gonna see a big shift. They'll say, no, I don't see nothing.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely. I think it is going to be sort of moving forward. You're going to get better in terms of it's like with brokers, isn't it? You start being a broker when you're first starting out, then day one, but then 2 years into doing it, a year into doing it, 2 years into doing it, you become perfect in terms of what you're doing. I'm never going to be a perfectionist on podcasting, absolutely not. But I'm hoping to get the people on and the guests on the show that will help build people's businesses.
Well, your studio, your display is finally. It took us a year to get a good shot, but now you look good.
Finally got there. Look at that. But I think I do love Elgato, as you've talked about. But I think the thing is, like, if you're starting out and doing a podcast, you don't need all the gear. You can literally do it with your iPhone and just get on with it, really.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you do, and now, like you say, it's because with the show now even airs, like you say, we now live stream it as well. That's all been new. That's all new. There's so much cool things we've been doing. So, anyway, let's wrap this one up and let them get the best bits.
Brill. Thanks very much, Ash, for being on this podcast, the anniversary one, and thanks for all your help and support this year.
There you go. Thank you very much. I'll send you my bill.